Nonetheless, Israel attacked 122 health facilities in Gaza, including 15 hospitals, and on several of them dropped white phosphorus. What about the mosques? It's a pretty heinous crime to attack ambulances, to attack hospitals, and to attack places of worship. Israel claimed that the mosques were being used to store weapons. So far, no evidence has been put forth to validate that claim. But there's another peculiarity about that claim. Let's even say, for argument's sake, it's true. But then why was Israel systematically targeting in Gaza the minarets on the mosques? One after another, they blew up the minarets. The minarets in Gaza are too narrow. They don't contain staircases, and they're too narrow for a sniper or for an observation post. So why was Israel targeting the minarets? The distinguished South African jurist John Dugard, he led a fact-finding mission to Gaza, and he concluded, and now I'll quote him, the mosques, and more particularly the minarets, had been targeted on the grounds that they symbolize Islam. Well, that's obviously a good reason. You can't quarrel with that. Well, we're told that there was a lot of death, a lot of devastation in Gaza. You can't blame Israel because it was all Hamas's fault. They were using the Palestinians in Gaza as human shields. They were hiding behind them. They were inviting an attack by Israel. How many people in this room have heard the allegation that Hamas was using human shields in Gaza? Raise your hand. Yeah, pretty difficult not to have heard that claim, unless you're suffering from a brain disability. But I wonder how many of you have heard what the human rights organizations concluded after investigating that allegation. Let me quote to you the most reputable of them, Amnesty International. It said, and now I'm quoting, contrary to repeated allegations by Israeli officials of the use of human shields, Amnesty International found no evidence that Hamas or other Palestinian fighters directed the movement of civilians to shield military objectives from attacks. Amnesty International found no evidence that Hamas or other armed groups forced residents to stay in or around buildings used by fighters. Amnesty International found no evidence that fighters prevented residents from leaving buildings or areas which had been commandeered by militants. Now here's the interesting question. Virtually everybody in this room has heard the claim, the allegation, that Hamas used Palestinians as human shields. How many of you are aware that all the human rights organizations concluded that they didn't? Raise your hand. Well, look around. Now, how did that come to pass? How is it that everybody knows the Israeli propaganda claim, but nobody, or virtually nobody, knows was what the human rights organizations subsequently found. We're told it's because of that Hamas human shielding that there was so much death and devastation in Gaza. Leaving aside that the human shields never happened on the Palestinian side, there's another problem. How did the people die in Gaza? Did they die in the midst of crossfire? Hamas militants hiding behind civilians? Battles? Is that what happened? Was it the fog of war? Here's what Amnesty found. The victims of the attacks were not caught in the crossfire of battles between Palestinian militants and Israeli forces, nor were they shielding militants or other legitimate targets. Many were killed when their homes were bombed while they slept. Others were going about their daily activities in their homes, sitting in their yard, hanging the laundry on the roof, when they were targeted in airstrikes or tank shelling. Children were studying or playing in their bedrooms or on the roof or outside their homes when they were struck by missiles or tank shells. Now, it's not quite true to say that there was no human shielding in Gaza, yet there was quite extensive human shielding in Gaza. Human shielding by Israeli soldiers who were using Palestinians as human shields. I even noticed today, maybe the Messiah is coming, because it was reported that Israel is actually indicting 2 soldiers for using a 9-year-old as a human shield. All the investigative bodies, of which there are many, and I will get to them in a moment, all the investigative bodies concluded that Israel committed multiple war crimes, and possibly or definitely crimes against humanity. They all conclude that Hamas committed comparable war crimes, but obviously on an incomparably smaller scale. How many crimes can ants commit against a child, incinerating them with a magnifying glass? In April 2009, a few months after the Gaza massacre ended, the President of the United Nations Human Rights Council created a fact-finding mission to investigate what happened in Gaza on all sides, the Israeli side, the Palestinian side. And they appointed Richard Goldstone, the former prosecutor of the International Criminal Tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And a few months later, the Goldstone report came out. It's a hefty document. It runs to 500 pages, 450 pages, single-spaced. I've read it this evening. When I get back to my room, I will complete my 3rd reading of it. It's a difficult read, but I have to say it's very rewarding. It's very meticulous, cautious, careful, harrowing, grisly, and sobering. There are parts of it which are really very painful to read. How the Palestinian prisoners were treated, the tortures they were subjected to. It's a document worth reading, I think. The Goldstone mission concluded that Israel aimed, or I should say first, that the disproportionate destruction and violence against civilians in Gaza were part of a deliberate policy